from all, to all, with all, for all, through all. We thank the gods of creation. We thank the ancestors. We thank the forces of nature. And we thank the earth. We thank them for their direction, their protection, their guidance, for keeping us, showing us, allowing us to know and enjoy life to its fullest, now and later.
Black people who once loved with the slow march of time. Time was ours to hold in the soft, love-warm chambers of our hearts. And was we, the Afro mommies and daddies of a sun world, would turn our strands of hair into antennas to tune in the juju madness and syncopated love rhythms of Africa. And we loved with time, and we took the time to love, and with the right time we loved, and we loved time after time. Will we ever love again? Will we ever love again? Will we really ever love again? Or will we just sit and rot away with the brighter tomorrows in the skag field, rat-cluttered halls of our minds?
Black people, what y'all gonna do? Black people, what y'all gonna do?
Will the real black people please stand up?
Let our rejoicing rise high as listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Listen to me now, yo, before Dr. Dre, there was Dr. James, welding cords around a copper frame. We sing songs not for the accolades, to lift voices like a helicopter blade. High in the listening skies, my eyes glisten and tears drop down like rain. Not from the pain, from the joy of how far we came. My brainstorms are designed to celebrate our reign. Yeah, when you put it in perspective, the collective, monuments erected, continents affected, presidents elected, ancestors making moves with the music we've been blessed with. We use it to keep communities connected. Through harmonies, a harmony is collected. Reaping the fruits our foremothers invested. Lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, yeah, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, listen, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on. Sing a song,
Yeah, talk to
full of the faith that the dark past
Jumbo Habari, and welcome once again to our story, the program that makes being black positive, relevant, desirable, and true to a lost nation in America. A program that speaks to the historical significance of the original people of the earth. Our Story Network takes pride in setting itself away from other programs that centers on entertainment or rhetorical mumbo-jumbo that misdirects your attention onto other things that causes you to exhaust your resources and renders you brain dead. It is Our Story who talks about commitment to you and your people. It is Our Story that champions the reestablishment of the black genius that once ruled the world. It is Our Story that focuses you in on the rewards of black advocacy, black activism, black involvement, and black power. It is Our Story that encourages survival of the black race and solicits your involvement to that end. Black people must remember, race first is the call of the day, and we as a people must, I say must, take the pledge if we, the people of the original race, expect to survive. As I take the many lessons I have received over the years and reflect upon them by sharing these lessons with my brothers and sisters, I realize the power that we as a people possess for the most part has gone unnoticed. The masses of black folks who have been rendered lost and disenfranchised from the meaning and mission our creators intended for us to embrace is all but depleted. It is because of the mission and meaning of the life of our ancestors that I realize how blessed as black people we really are. What fascinates me are the many gifts I have been granted, which allows me to distribute the information onward to you. As always, that message begins and ends with the importance of blackness. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Greetings, friends, comrades, family, the inquisitive onlookers, and our beloved viewers. Welcome, welcome, and welcome to Our Story Network. We thank you for being with us this evening, and we trust you will take something of value away with you after the program. That is the aim and goals of Our Story Network, the network that leads the pack in modern-day communications and ancient and modern education. I say ancient and modern education because of the many errors we have found in the descriptions and the interpretations of ancient records. The modern revelation by new black scholars have opened the window of discovery that has allowed the truth of knowledge originally disseminated by the black masters of education to flourish once again. This is one of the stumbling blocks that has kept black people from rebuilding their greatness and recapturing their birthright. People, listen to me. As black people, we have a rich heritage and an endless fountain of creativity that can and will pull us up from the ashes like the mythical bird called the phoenix. And why shouldn't black people be as virile as the phoenix? After all, black people have shown the vigor by showing strength and power over the years which endured enslavement. After all, black people have and continue to be associated with the sun. And like the phoenix, black people have obtained new life by arising from the ashes of slavery. According to some sources, the phoenix died in a show of flames and combustion. Although There are other sources that claim that the legendary bird died and simply decomposed before being born again. Either way, there are different traditions concerning the lifespan of the phoenix. But by most accounts, the phoenix lived for 500 years before rebirth. Is this not the length of time black people in America have been enslaved? Being born again is a trait commonly known to the people of the sun. After all, haven't we learned that the people of Kemet were big on the afterlife and the resurrection of the dead? The so-called pyramids of Egypt are said to hold the secrets of life and death. Known for the rebirth of a person or a people, the knowledge practiced in ancient Kemet was and continues to be the foundation from which Christianity lays claim to the rebirth theory. Therefore, blacks have been the accepted practitioners of the ancient arts, providing the link and direct connection of black people rebirthing themselves. With all of the symbolisms we have from our ancestors, aren't we equipped to call on our ancestors to release the chains that binds black people, to allow us to be reborn again? The only problem standing in our way is the lack of knowledge of ourselves and fear that we might step on someone's toes. But after 500 years of bondage, aren't we entitled to step on a few toes to gain our freedom once again? But how many times do we ask ourselves what we are entitled to? Which brings up the People's Assembly. I had an opportunity to attend the People's Assembly this past weekend in Durham, North Carolina. It was the site of this annual gathering where the Freedom Manifesto draft was discussed. The purpose of this assembly is to rebuild the Black liberation movement. It is stated within the manifesto that Black history is the fight for freedom. It goes on further to explain it takes an awakening of militant activism, fighting police terror, jobs, living wage, homelessness, housing, education, environmental racism, human rights for the LGBT, and more. My reason for being there was to sell books and sign autographs. As an old trooper, I have seen this before. Attempts at bringing all groups fighting for liberation under one umbrella. The problem then and the problem now have not changed. A common fight must be rooted in culture and the need to become a whole people. The fact that many foreign agendas through foreign cultures have taken advantage of the Black movement. Foreign cultures continue to divide and conquer the Black race. Foreign cultures continue to depress and deflate the value of Black experience. So after saying all of this, what are the alternatives? After working nearly 50 years in the movement, I clearly see the only answer is for Blacks to dedicate themselves to a Black agenda. It cannot be inclusive of any other agenda. A Black agenda must be an agenda dedicated to Blackness. Dedicated to Blackness means returning Black folks to its proper place under the sun. Many of you know compromise means negotiating away many of our strengths. Compromise means accepting something less than what you would normally accept. If we look at history, we find black people have been the ones and the only ones who compromise themselves into oblivion. When we examine history, we find many factions that tie themselves to the bootstraps of the black movement actually posting greater gains than the black movement itself. Understand, I am talking about the black movement from day one. That is to say, pre-Egyptian era. Why pre-Egyptian era? Because pre-Egyptian era created the black movement to reestablish the black leadership or black stewardship. This is when whites were solidly on the planet, challenging the leadership of the black original people. It was during this time that blacks were called to prove their greatness and knowledge factor by creating great feats of science. Here is where the pyramids were constructed to prove the claim that blacks had to a stewardship to be able to enjoy prior to the whites being found on the face of the earth. Since this time, it is obvious the gains others have made outnumber the gains blacks have enjoyed up and until today. Based on these figures, blacks need to be very conservative about the amount of information and support blacks lend to other agendas. There are two very troubling examples today. The first, the number of blacks in the U.S. Senate as opposed to the number of women in the U.S. Senate. The second, the short-lived legislation of gays and transgender movement that has in recent years shadowed decades of gains and attempts of gains of the black movement. My bottom line, all of the allies who signed on to assist the black movement have actually moved light years ahead of the black movement. This was possible because these organizations used the strength and energy they found in the black movement as easy targets of compromise and retooling these individuals who were originally attracted by the black agenda. After fighting next to those who have ulterior motives, it was easy to persuade the black agenda proponents to embrace the newly found agenda of the allies who claim to be fighting for black issues. The Freedom Manifesto is more of a socialist communist manifesto than a black agenda. Over the years, it has been evident that the socialist communist agenda has deflated the black movement as opposed to energizing the black agenda. But isn't the socialist communist agenda in line with white supremacy? Can't we see white privilege in the socialist communist agenda? Where are the differences in white treatment of blacks around the world, and where do they carry the black banner? Where have the white socialist communists advocated to return the black birthrights? None and nowhere, I answer. And additionally, why is it so hard to see any difference between racism in any of the socialist, communist, and capitalist countries? During the recent trip, I was able to visit Fayetteville, North Carolina, the city I spent several years at during my days in the military. 50 years later, I find the small town of Fayetteville, North Carolina is a large, thriving metropolis that has left the black community behind. 50 years ago, the major attractions of Fayetteville was the billboard at the Fayetteville Interstate 95 exit with a Ku Klux Klan member in full regalia on a reared white horse, welcoming the people to the home of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And the other one is the clock tower found in the center of town that also doubled as an auction block for black slaves. What you are seeing are pictures of that auction block. This is similar to the reminders here in New Orleans. The Confederate monuments are reminders of slavery. The slave auction is a reminder of slavery. Where are the liberal white people who were anxious to assist black people in eliminating the memories of inhumanity to human people? I use this simply examples as proof of whites not being serious about assisting blacks in the black agenda. As we look at the pictures of whites' failure to get involved and fight the black battle whites created, isn't it interesting? Whites are responsible for black plight, and yet when whites get involved in the black agenda, whites can't find any meaningful, productive way of showing their sincerity in recovering the right they wronged, which is a backwards way of saying whites are not going to assist blacks in returning to their level of existence or the position the creators placed black people in at the point in time of creation. So how can black people believe white people are ready to change or at the outset work in the best interests of blacks? Which takes us back to the original statement. The black agenda must be rooted in culture. This way, the work of the black movement will be protected as an intellectual property. So-called allies cannot usurp the energy and birthright blacks were granted at the point in time of creation. Blacks can get back to the time when humans were in harmony with the totality of life. Now, who can we talk about when we talk about the black agenda without talking about blacks prior to white people being present on the face of the earth? No. The correct answer is, why haven't other black forums considered these questions? Especially after the history of white participation within the black agenda. Hasn't the white participation within the black movement caused reason for all of us to question the white movement? What about the black socialist communists who are supposedly trained in scientific thinking? Why haven't they followed a course of probative acquisition to ensure the sincerity of the white engagements with the black agenda? Evidence of this engagement can be found at the site of the slave market in Fayetteville, North Carolina, by the Society of Colonial Dames. This society is an American organization composed of women who are descended from an ancestor who came to reside in the American colonies before 1776 and whose services were rendered during the colonial period. The organization has 45 corporate societies and over 15,000 members. The national headquarters are at Dunbarton House in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. The description given gives no account about their association with slavery, but the plaque posted at the slave market suggests these people were supporters of slavery. The plaque clearly states this: to commemorate the following events. First, organized Scotch settlements at Cape Fear, 1783. The establishment of Cumberland County, 1754. Liberty Point Declaration of Independence, June 20th, 1775. Cross Creek and Campbellton, United States Incorporated as Fayetteville in 1783. On this site stood the State House. The University of North Carolina was granted its charter here. Lafayette was welcomed here March 4th, 1825. The present structure, built about 1838, replaced the original one destroyed by fire in 1831. This is a lot of Confederate history, but the revealing part is the fact that after all of the structures that went before the slave market was the one worth preserving. The plaque ends by stating, the Women's Civic Association, organized in 1907, has preserved this building. My history with this building was one of many blacks who were stationed at Fort Bragg. And it was repulsive and repugnant. In fact, this is a reminder of a failed mission some took on 50 years ago to destroy this structure. Black folks wanted to blow this building up. But as you can see, it is still standing, as do many of the reminders of slavery today. Another plaque found in the slave market is a statement of Charles Waddell Chestnut, who lived from 1858 to 1932. Charles Chestnut was an African-American author, essayist, political activist, and lawyer, best known for his novel and short stories exploring complex issues of racial and social identity in the post-Civil War. Charles wrote this, and it is found on the wall of the slave market. We shall come up slowly and painfully, perhaps, but we shall win our way. This was presented by the City Council of Fayetteville in 1989. To place this plaque in the slave market that reads, in memory and honor of those indomitable people who were stripped of their dignity when sold as slaves at this place. Their courage in that time is a proud heritage of all times. They endured the past so the future could be won for freedom and justice. Their sufferings and shame afforded the opportunity for future generations to be responsible citizens, free to live, work, and worship in the pursuit of the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. These are words from Charles Waddell Chestnut. How many of us today think in these terms? Of course, this man was born during the enslavement of black people. I'm sure he was a slave for a few years. So is this why many of us today reject this type of thinking? Because we have not personally experienced the horrors of slavery? I take you back to my original concerns in this lecture. A black agenda composed, controlled, and orchestrated by blacks for blacks. A simple concept that has baffled the brilliant black minds of many a black leader. I say baffled because we as a people have not reached the point in time where we can talk about blackness collectively, especially the black movement, that is, going forward with members and missions seen and heard by the masses. Which leads me into why my recent work, Our Story, the Original Holocaust, was written from the ancestral position, a position which gets very little time in discussion. Black people have been forced into a position that demands blacks to allow whites to be compensated for their horrifying deeds of displacing and enslaving black people. Whenever whites demand to be included in a black agenda, that demand grants leadership to whites and dilutes the mission and the meaning of a black agenda. That is why Our Story, the Original Holocaust, is unapologetically frank and honest with his story that has been given to the world as being fact and Bible. The only way this could be accomplished is for blacks to either accept without question or demand a cut of the action that the oppressor is realizing. Either way, black people come out on the losing end. At this assembly, I was able to interest many goers in purchasing my book as a way of enlightening their perspective and answering many of the flawed visions blacks have of this world. As we have talked about this recent trip to Durham, North Carolina, we talked about Fayetteville, North Carolina, and we talked about the black agenda. I want to talk briefly about the freedom, as they call it, the Freedom Manifesto that this group has put together several years ago. And within it, it talks about the need for blacks to join with other groups and to fight for freedom collectively. As I raised in my commentary, what have we as blacks realized from this union of supporters who supposedly have joined the black fight, the black movement, fighting for freedom to free blacks? But when we look at what has truly happened, we find that we have not really gained very much. In fact, the little gains we've made seem to be losing every day. I pointed out in my commentary the fact that women, the women's movement, joined forces with the black movement many, many years ago. In the years that have since passed, they have increased their visibility, their employment. They have increased their effectiveness tenfold over the effectiveness of the black movement. Now we are bombarded with the gay pride, gay liberation movement that is trying to usurp the strength, energy, and power of the black movement so that it can surpass the black movement and become the patriarch of the gains that we as a people have suffered, fought, died, bled for. It's difficult to talk with people who want to become a part of a movement but can't understand one's unreadiness based upon past behaviors. I have to question our leadership today, because none of these questions that I raised in this commentary has been raised by our current leadership. I look at people like Jesse Jackson, who created the Rainbow Coalition, which openly invites other ethnic groups to participate. And then in recent years openly invited the gay liberation movement, who happened to take on Rainbow Coalition's totem, their trade and symbol, the rainbow. I look at Al Sharpton, who has become a viable and visible member of the news media, who has a show every Sunday morning, who uses his platform mostly to promote his organization. And if something happens and the people are not willing to compromise and accept his conditions, then Al doesn't sign on, he doesn't show up. You know, it is difficult when I see youngsters in their 20s and 30s going down the same path I went down when I was in my 20s and 30s. But the big difference is their purpose is not rooted in the same purpose that my brothers and sisters were rooted in when I was in my 20s and 30s and moving towards victory at that time. We don't teach what happened in my generation to this current generation. So therefore, they're doomed to make the same mistakes we made. They're doomed to have the same ills and problems visit them. And for some reason, many of them don't even want a dialogue about it. I know some of you do hear me on Mondays on the Chuck Wagon on WBOK. And there's a difference between Chuck's position and my position. Chuck does not want to believe that this world is as cruel and as cold as it is. He wants to maintain hope. Whereas I'm saying we don't have to deal with hope. All we have to do is bring history to the forefront and allow history to determine which path we take. We don't have to deal with hope, faith, when we have years of history to prove what it is, how it is, and why it is. We need to do things differently. I want to continue to talk about the strategies that we're employing today. Unfortunately, many of those strategies are the same strategies we've employed for the last 50, 60 years. And if you know anything about warfare, you'll know that in battle, you can't continue to use the same strategies over and over again, because the enemy can read everything you're doing before you do it. When are we going to come up with some new strategies? When are we going to begin not to make threats, but when are we going to begin to take action? Do you realize and understand that black people are being killed at or near the same level that blacks were being killed 100 years ago? 150 years ago, for that matter. We are not willing to face the truth about white America, white people, and why blacks are suffering and in the position that they are in today. You realize that we are worse off in 2018 than we were in 1918? And why do I say that? Because in 1918, many of us knew who the enemy was. Many of us knew what the conditions were and what it takes to be able to survive in this country. But today, you try to wake people up. They don't want to hear it. They want to say, that's impossible. We have won the war. We have gained our civil rights. We are able to vote. We are able to be free. And at the same time, afraid to drive around the corner for fear that the police will pull you over. Is that freedom? Let's look at the electoral situation. We've elected a number of elected officials who claim to be black. In fact, we elected one a few years ago to the highest office in the land. Why is it that we had a man who claimed to be black who was elected president of the United States but did more for white folks than he did for blacks. It's the reality of it. When we enter into that conversation, we are abruptly cut off because everyone is living the hype. Everyone is living the party because he was elected. But all of us had to pay the price for his election. And that price was, well, he made it to be the president. That's it. You don't get anything more than that. Let's look at our schools here in Orleans Parish. We have blacks on the school board. In fact, we have a black delegation from Orleans Parish who created the problems that we have in the school system today. They introduced legislation that has caused us to lose neighborhood schools, that has caused us to send our children out 5:30 in the morning waiting on a bus to be taken across town. And in the winter months, they come back home, it's dark, they leave when it's dark. So where is the protection? Where is the concern about our children? And we can't expect anyone to be concerned about our children more than we are concerned about our own. But it's not just the schools, it's not just the state legislature, it's not just city council, it's across the board. And we're not doing anything to make things any better. We are continuing to feed the monster that's in position to devour us. We continue to feed that monster. And we are constantly waiting on someone else to step up to the plate and address the problems that we claim that are problems that are attacking us. The few who step up do not get the support of the many who sit back. Yet, recent history has proven the ones that sit back run when the word is given that benefits are being given out. Changes are being made. They can enjoy them. They can bask in that revelation of profitability. They can bask in the revelation that we have received something that we weren't expecting. And it's unfortunate because even our clergy is not functioning in the same capacity that they functioned in 50, 60, 70, 100 years ago. We shouldn't have these problems, especially with our children, with all these churches that we have on every corner. The churches alone could eliminate all of the problems with the school system, all of them. And you know what would eliminate the problems with the schools? Pull your children out. If we were to decrease the school population from 40 to 70%, the school system would come begging for us to bring our children back and would give us the concessions that we want. But many of us don't feel that it's worth the struggle, nor is worth the sacrifice that has to be made. You know, I talked about compromise earlier, but let me talk about sacrifice for a quick minute. We do not sacrifice anymore. And it's killing us because we're not sacrificing. Do you realize that we have a people who's supposedly more educated today than we had 50, 60, 70 years ago? But we're in the same, if not worse, conditions than they were. So what good has the education been? Who has really benefited from the education? We have more churches today than we've ever had. Who's benefiting from the churches? There's a few. Many go, but only a few benefit. We need to start looking at where we are, what is happening to us, and what is the end result as we continue to go further down this road that we know is a disastrous road. It's unfortunate that there's nothing that seems to motivate our people to bring us out and to do what's necessary to bring about real change. As I normally say, we have the fastest hour in television. And I believe I've said a lot within this last 57 minutes. I have challenged all of you in one way or another. And at some point in time, you're going to have to come from behind those rocks that you're hiding in and do something that is going to help you and others as well. I remind you that Mondays from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, I'm on the Chuck Perkins Show on WBOK 12:30 a.m. Every Wednesday evening I'm here. You can pick us up now on YouTube at Our Story TV show. And they're going to put the number up where you can reach out by phone and get in touch with us if you have a need. Books are available at Community Book Center, Wayne's World, in Sons on St. Claude, and Educator's Delight on Holiday Drive on the West Bank. So once again, my brothers and sisters, I trust I put something on your heart. I put something on your mind that will bring you to the realization that you must do something for yourself and all of us as well. Because if you do something for yourself, you're going to benefit the rest of us. Remember that? I want you to stay strong, brothers and sisters. I want you to stay collectively and mentally in tune with the all. But most important, I want you to make a commitment to blackness that will carry us from now until kingdom come. Until we meet again, brothers and sisters, Uhuru Sasa Umgawa.
Mothers invested, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, yeah, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, listen, lift every voice till freedom has manifested. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
Sing a song,
yeah, talk to
full of the faith that the dark past has taught us.
come on.
Sing a song, full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun
Facing the rising sun, come on.
of our new day begun.
It's a new day.
Let us march on
Yeah.
till victory is
Yeah,
won.
until victory is won, come
Till victory is
This is
won.
victory music. Come on, I hope you feel it.
Ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.